social media platforms are under pressure to hand over crucial data on the number of children using their sites. The eSafety Commission has also given big tech players such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and TikTok 30 days to reveal how many children have accounts and how they enforce their own age restrictions. Now, the minimum age limit is typically 13 for these sites, but as we all know, there are plenty of kids younger than that who are on social media and suffering repercussions because of it. I'm joined now by child and adolescent psychologist Clare Rowe. Clare, thanks for joining me tonight. It's almost like these platforms want children roaming online.
Yeah, well, of course they do, James, because that's more eyeballs and more brains to addict to their product, isn't it? So what people need to understand is these, billion-dollar tech companies literally employ thousands of people in places like Silicon Valley, where their only job is to work out how to tweak that platform to keep you on it for longer. And, like they say, if it appears to be free, then the product is you. The product thereafter is your attention. And so I suppose what better way to guarantee new lifelong customers of addicted minds and put advertising in front of, but to target young children and get them hooked early on. So, I'm very cynical, to say the least, whether tech companies are really genuine about working with government and regulatory bodies to keep kids safe and keep kids off them. It doesn't make sense for them from a business model, to say the least.
So that's great for those companies. They're getting new customers. But talk to me as a child psychologist. And, we've read ad nauseum about all the problems that this is causing. But, how bad is it for our kids?
Yeah, I sound pretty doom and gloom when I speak about this, but I have been for the last decade now. It's not just, James, the content that they see online, and we know that that's just unfettered, a cesspit of inappropriate material. Like I've said for a long time, we underprotect our kids in the real world, overprotect them, and we completely, underprotect them in the online world. But what we forget about as well, it's not just what they're seeing online, but it's what they're not doing when they're online. And we're talking like 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day. They're not socialising, they're not talking to each other, they're not getting outside. And so, it's literally, the hours per week and month that add up that are taken away from what previous generations would be doing of 8, 9, 10-year-olds, which is having a play-based childhood. And there's, importance in a play-based childhood for developmental outcomes for children. And there's literally parts of the brain, I think, with children now that are changing before our eyes. And that comes down to things like impulsivity, patience, attention, creativity, the ability to self-entertain. Parents would know that with kids these days, they're just losing all these cognitive abilities. So I think it's disastrous, and I think that we've spoken enough about it and the data is there enough for us to make some decisions and legislate against it for kids.
Okay, so the government is going hard on the big tech companies. They want to know how many kids are using your app and what are you doing about it. But would these companies even know how many children are accessing their apps and, creating accounts? How would they even know this?
Well, they won't. That's exactly what I thought when I read this, James. I'm not against data collection at all if it informs good policy making and decisions. But as we know, as you said in your introduction, you've got to enter a date of birth on these apps that is 13 years and above to get an account. And so, of course, what kids do, and sometimes their parents for them, is they just enter a fake birth date. And so I can't imagine that these companies have any data, reliable data, on the amount of kids that are under 13 using social media. That data usually comes from widespread surveys of parents and families. And shockingly, it is confirmed that we've got, 8 and 9-year-olds on social media weekly. And so, I can't see, first of all, why these companies would feel obliged to hand over data, why they would want to do it. But second of all, the data that they have, I just can't see how that actually reflects what's really going on.
So you raise a great point. What do you say to people who argue this is overreach on the part of the government? It's mum and dad, not Mark Zuckerberg, who should police their children's internet use.
Yeah, well, on face value, I would actually agree with that. But I think parents face two main problems. The first one is if the children are already on these apps, they are addicted. And I don't use that word lightly. I have seen the most loveliest of children become manipulative, aggressive, lying, clinically depressed and withdrawn as they literally struggle from their dopamine withdrawal symptoms of being away from these platforms. I mean, it's shocking. And second of all is that the pressure parents are under because everyone else has it. And so they don't want to exclude their child. They don't want to ostracize them. They're all having their conversations on these platforms. And so I do think, and I've said this for a long time, this problem could be solved tomorrow. And I think parents have no idea about the power that they have in collective action. We don't need every kid off these apps. What we need is a couple in each classroom. And we need a movement by parents to say, look, not everyone in the class has it, actually. There's half a dozen of you who don't. And so you're not getting it. And I think legislating that will actually give parents the confidence to say, no, it's against the law, you're not having it. So it's more about giving parents the confidence of having that discussion in their family home, because I agree, actually, I think it does come back to parents.
Claire, we've got to go to a break, but just very quickly before we go, there's one more question I want to ask you. Some people say the government isn't really concerned about kids. They're using the protection of kids as a Trojan horse to introduce the digital ID. What do you say to that?
Look, both might be true. I don't think that the government is not concerned about kids. I think the lobby groups have done really well. I think government and opposition are concerned about kids. Whether that is now also simultaneously an opportunity to soft launch or test digital ID is a discussion that we need to have. But I think that's a whole other topic. And I actually don't think that, being careful about bringing in digital ID, I don't want that to delay what we should do now, which is just to ban social media. And let's discuss the digital ID, down the track.
Clare Rowe, always good talking to you. Thanks for your time tonight.